Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're building a full stack application using Python Django as the backend and React.js as the frontend. This is not the first video in this tutorial series. In previous videos we've already completed the setup, page navigation and also the first part of the CRUD functionality. So please go back to those videos if this is your first time here. In this video we're going to build on our previous video where we already enable the code for creating and displaying records in our application. We created a nice looking table on our homepage, and we're now going to go and focus on the pages for editing records. And we're going to do that following 7 steps. We're going to start by creating a URL in our front end and creating a JS file for editing records. Next, we're going to go to our backend and we're going to add the ID field because that is what we're going to use to navigate to the different pages. We're going to change the buttons in the table that we've created in the previous video to make sure that we can redirect to the correct page. And when we're on that page, we're going to make sure that we can fetch the data, but only for the record that we're going to edit. We then need to make sure that those values are passed in as the default values of our forms. And then we're going to make some changes so we can submit any updates to the correct backend URL. And as the last item, we are going to go and test and make sure that everything works the way we expect. So let's get started with the first step. And that step is creating a new route in our front end. Because when we go to the page where we want to edit the record, we need a new URL to get there, which needs to be parameterized with something unique from that record. So I'm just going to copy the create path here, and I'm going to change that to edit. And I'm going to add a slash and specify a colon and ID, because I want to pass in the ID of each record as a parameter so we know exactly what information to get and what information we are submitting. The next thing that we need to do is create a JS file for editing these records. And creating that file is really easy because we can just copy over our create.js file and paste it in and call it edit.js. And we then need to make sure that the constant is also named edit and that the export in the end is also named. And now we need to go back to our app.js file and import our edit page to our app.js file. And now we can say that we want to show the edit page when we go to the root /edit/ID. Okay. With that now being set up, it is important that from the home page we're able to navigate to this edit page. And in the previous video we've set up this nice looking table with some buttons that are going to navigate to these different pages. And now we need to make sure that we can click on these buttons and actually go somewhere. So in our code, I'm going to go over to our home.js page. And on the top of the screen, I'm going to import link from React router DOM, and link needs to be in parentheses. This is going to enable us to go to different pages. And now we're going to go all the way down in our home.js page until you find the icon button with the edit icon inside of it. And in here, we're going to specify that the component of this icon button is equal to link. We also need to define where this link is going to. And as you will recall from what we've just done, we need to go to the edit URL and pass in the ID. So the logic behind this is going to be 2 backwards commas, and we need to go to edit and then slash and then $, and then these 2 curly brackets. And in here, we need to specify the ID of each of the rows in our table. The challenge that we currently have is that we don't get the ID from our backend to our front end. So we need to make a small change in our backend to realize that. So in our backend, we're going to go to API, and then we're going to go to serializers. And in the field section right here, we're going to pass in the ID field. And we can simply specify it like so and save it. And just like this, we're now passing in the ID field as well when we get the API for our homepage. So back in our home.js page, and now we need to put that row ID in here. And the first thing to do that is inside of render row actions, you want to specify row because we want to get some row level information. And next we can refer to that row by doing row.original and then specify the technical name, and that is going to be ID. If we save it like this, it should point towards the edit page with our parameter of ID. So let's check whether that's the case. So back in our front end, and when I now hover over my links, you can see that it is edit and then slash the ID field. And we can also already click on one of these, and it will bring me to the edit page /1, which will currently just be an empty copy of our create records page. So let's make some changes there so that we can display the correct information. Now in our edit page, the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually get the parameter that is in our URL, because we're going to be using that to fetch the record that we want to populate our forms with. So the first thing that I will do is, besides the import use navigate from React Router DOM, I'm also going to add use params, because this enables us to use the parameters that are passed in the URL inside of our code. And now I can pass in a constant that says my param, and that's going to be equal to use params. And I can now also say that the constant my ID is going to be equal to my param.id. And this should get us the ID that we need to get the relevant data inside of our requests. So let's go and actually fetch the data and see whether my ID actually displays the correct ID that we want. Now, already in our previous video in the home.js page, we've written quite some code that is able to get data using our Axios instance. So in this instance, I'm just going to copy that complete constant of get data, including the use effect thing that we've written there as well. And I'm going to paste that underneath the constant my ID. And for now, to show what we're actually going to get when we are getting our ID, I'm just going to, one of the things that we first also need to do is make sure that we have all of the relevant imports for this piece of code. So we need to import use effect, and we can do that by adding that to React right here, like so. And we also need to use, I'm also going to delete set my data because we don't actually need that one right now. And we also need the loading set loading part because we will also need that later. So I'm going to head over to my home.js page and also get the loading set loading ones from there and populate that inside of my code like this. But then we also need to import use state on the top from React. Okay, and the first thing that I want to test is when we do the use effect, whether we get the right parameter in our front end. So I'm just going to copy out the get data, and I'm just going to console.log our my ID variable, because that is going to check whether we get the right parameter to be using inside of our code. And I'm just going to copy out the constant get data because that one is not being used for now. So let's go to our front end and check what's going on. So we are back in our front end. I'm just going to reload the page. And now I'm going to inspect it, and hopefully in the console we will see the ID. And you can see that it's logging the ID of 1, which is correct because actually it has the 1 also in our link on top there as well. So with that working correctly, we can make sure that we fetch the right data. And we're going to fetch data with our constant get data. But instead of axios.get project, we need to pass in project / and then our ID. And we can do that the same way what we just did with the button in the home page. We can specify $, then the 2 curly brackets and say my ID. And when that is done, we're going to set loading to false, and we're going to do console.log rest.data. So let's now uncomment get data in our use effect and just delete the console.log. And let's see if we get the right data inside of our front end. So back in our front end again, and I'm going to reload the page once more. And when I click inspect and look at the console, I see an object, and in that object I indeed see project with the ID 1 with all of the data that we have here. So that is very, very good. But now we need to pass the data that we are fetching into our forms. And how we're going to do that? Well, the answer is quite easy. We're going to use set values from React hook form. And we don't actually need to import anything to do that. We can just go to the constant here where we define use form, and I can specify set values or set value as one of the things that we're going to use. And now after we get the data, like right here, I can use set value to populate each of these forms with the correct value. So for example, for name, I can say that name needs to be populated with res.data name, like so. And let's check out straight away whether that works. So back in our project, you can see immediately that it now has the name of our project into the form right here. So that's working just fine. And now we can do that for the other ones as well. So I can copy set value a few times. And for status, it's going to be res.data.status. For comments, it's going to be res.data.comments. And then we also have the start date and the end date. But if you remember from our previous video, those date formats are a little bit different in our backend than what the date picker is expecting. So to do that one correctly, we need to use day.js, which we've already imported in this file right here. And I can say day.js and then specify that it is res.data.start date. And I can also copy this over, put it right here, and do the same for the end date. Let's save it and see what we see in the front end. And actually, I also think that this set loading one we don't really need. So I'm going to remove this from our code and also remove use state. And back in our front end, you can see that now all of our form fields are populated with the values that we are expecting. And if I now go back to my home page, you can see that, for example, for project 2, we're expecting a date from the 27th of October to the 28th with a status of open. And when I click on the button, you will see project 2, 27th of October, 28th of October with the status open. So this is working nicely. Now the last thing we need to do is submit this data. And to do that right now, based on what we did before, is we handle the submission, and we're going to do exactly the same. But instead of posting it to project, we need to post it to project/1, because that is going to be the location where we do the updates. So similarly to what we did for getting the data, we're going to do $sign and then specify the ID of the row so that our backend knows what to update. And next to that, we also need to change .post to .put, because since we're using view sets, it expects a put statement instead of a post statement. Okay, so now we can see what happens when we submit data. So let's go to our front end and let's enter some changes. So this is project to changed. I'm going to set the start date to today's date, which is the 31st, and the end date is going to be the end of next month. The comments are going to be my changed comments, and the status is going to be completed. I'm now going to click on submit, and we now are getting an error, and I already know why that is, because our Axios instance.put always needs to have a trailing slash instead of just the ID here. So make sure you add this trailing slash, otherwise it will not work. So we now need to change this again. So I say project to change, my comments changed, status completed, and then also say start date here and the end date to next month. And now click submit, and we're being redirected to our home page again. Now what I did find is that sometimes it takes a little while before Django realizes that this change is made. So I'm just going to wake up my backend server by making a change so it reloads. And when I now refresh over here, you will see that also in my database these values appear as changed. And that's simply because React.js is a little bit faster in going here than our backend could actually update. So this is all working fine. And that is actually all that we're going to do for today. In this video, I showed you how you can update your records inside of your React.js application. And in the next videos, we're going to continue, and I'm going to show you how we can go and delete records from our database. And we're also going to focus on form validation in the video afterwards. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.